This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/mapperforward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome back to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm Lisa Farr, and today I am joined for episode 3 of 5 with Matt McCormack. We're talking about cybersecurity. Matt, let's talk about social engineering, because in the coffee industry, we're a highly empathetic group of people who are all about community and about love. And so when somebody tries to social engineer people in our industry, it's usually very easy. So can you talk about what social engineering is and how it's used to connect people, how it's used as a way into cybercrime by cybercriminals?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, we think about cybercriminals as being very sophisticated and they're hacking and, they're wearing their hoodies and doing all sorts of green text on a black background, like the Matrix.
Anonymous masks.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of them, it turns out, like a lot of it are just a bunch of people in various African countries trying to just scam people, right? That's like a lot of it, and a lot of the social, or in India, a lot of it comes from. So, and social engineering, kind of by definition, is trying to persuade someone into doing something for you that is against their interest, right? So that might not be the definition, but in our case, we're talking about you're going to get texts or phone calls or emails purporting to be from someone else trying to trick you into doing something. So we talked before about the importance of having two-factor. Social engineering is kind of one of the somewhat reliable ways for attackers to circumvent that, right? If they somehow get your username and password and then they try to log into the website and it says it requires an SMS verification and they have your phone number, they might set up some kind of pretend to be from someone else, pretend to be from the bank. There's a lot of ANZ scams going on at the moment. There's always the Amazon ones. But let's say they tricked you into giving them the code. Say, we're going to text you. This is the whatever company.com's security team. We need you to give us the text, the number that we're going to text you now, right? And then you give the number, and then that bypasses the two-factor. Or it may just be you're tricked into paying some amount of money. Invoices as fake invoices. So these are really common, and that's for small to medium businesses. I think it's really important to talk about that. What's kind of known as business email compromise, and this is BEC in the industry. And this is so let's say that, like we talked about before, let's say that someone manages to get their hands on an email and password for someone in your organization. And they are able to then email from within your organization to you, say, hey, we've got this vendor, we somehow haven't paid this invoice. We need to, here's the invoice, we need to just transfer money to this account. Very simple, very effective. It's worth billions a year lost through this, like, basic,
wowzers.
Through basic, like compromise the business email, use that to perform social engineering, right? Because if it's coming from inside your company, you're very less likely to think twice about it. And especially if they can kind of worm their way into getting the email or password or getting on the machine of, the CFO or someone else who handles financials normally, and just then it's, they're off to the races, right?
Can I mention something on that I saw in preparation for this episode, was the very sneaky ways, because usually if I get an email that looks suspect, I'll check the email address first of all, even if it says, it's come from Wells Fargo Bank, whatever. I'll check to see the details of the email address. And now what I've noticed is there's some very sneaky things of what they'll do is, like, if the website or the email address has usually an A in it, they've changed it from the normal A to like a Russian A character.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it looks like it's the correct email address, but the difference in the A which like has the kind of the hang over the top, versus the way that a Russian A or at, right, like they're just getting so much more sophisticated in the way they're disguising a legitimate password with, a legitimate email address with a fake one. It looks like it's the real thing, but just a subtle difference in one character that's come from a different language but still is valid in setting that up. One of my employees got sent an email from me, supposedly, saying, so it was a sales person. He got sent an email from Lee saying, can you go to Target and pick up a bunch of gift cards and email me back the numbers. And he called me and he's like, why do you need Target gift cards? And I'm like, I don't. He said, well, you just emailed me. That's a perfect example of social engineering right there.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that wouldn't require anything really technical. Just trick someone to go and doing something for you, right? Or that email address could have had an invoice attached, and you end up at, you address it, you send money to a Western Union account, you never see it again. Or some of these banks that are kind of, intentionally or not, really bad at tracing down dodgy transactions, right? I mean, if I'm often used by criminals, and making money off it as a bank, then they've got good incentives to try and sort that, go and find you that money. So absolutely, social engineering is a big thing. So the business email compromise, like for example, for a while there, real estate agencies in Australia were being targeted, right? Because they would kind of get access to an email address, watch the email until there was a house sale, and before the deposit got put in to someone's account, they would, email and say, actually, sorry, wrong account details. Can you put them over here instead?
No shit.
So people would just lose their deposits when they would buy a house and lose their deposits. Because, if you can just get in the middle of those transactions, right? So it might be just something as simple as that. Someone's watching, or an army of people are watching these email addresses until an opportunity comes up. And then you inject with, oh, actually, here's the invoice, or actually, here's the account details, or actually, whatever it may be. And this sounds, very unlikely and far-fetched, but it's really worth a lot of money for people who someone's sitting in some an African country, which is quite common. The joke is the Nigerian prince. It is unfortunately the stereotype is relatively true. And so this is a big, people are willing to put the time in because it's a big win if they pull it off, right? If they pull off 10 grand. Oh, yeah. It's a lot of money, right? If you pull off more.
Green coffee buying can sometimes be, if you're buying a container of green coffee, it can be a couple of $100,000.
Yeah, there you go.
And so if you're ordering 4 containers of coffee from Papua New Guinea and that's on the water, and somehow a hacker happens to intercept the payment of that because you got to pay it once it arrives in the country. If they're able to intercept that payment route, we got a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if your company's, if you're especially if you're a larger buyer, right, and you're doing, like you're saying, container ships of coffee, presumably you're a bigger company then. So your threat model, as we discussed before, is a bit different then. I think you have a much more exposure to potential issues, and once you're a company who's earning millions a year kind of thing, hopefully you've got someone more than just a dude on a podcast telling you how to do security, because it is a big thing. But absolutely, so I wanted to make sure we called that out, because it's not all about we talked before about exploits and all these companies and Jeff Bezos being hacked. Like, a lot of it is just falling for a trick. Sending some money somewhere, giving credit card details when you shouldn't have, or letting someone in to then ransom your stuff.
And some of these people can be incredibly charming.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, this is their job, right? This is they get good at it, right? They absolutely can be charming. We could really go down the rabbit hole of social engineering, because it's kind of almost a whole industry in itself. When as a company, let's say as a legitimate company, I might hire a third-party security vendor to audit my systems, or and I'll say, look, you've got carte blanche. If you can get into my company, you tell me how you did it, and we'll fix that. a lot of it is just social engineering, right? They'll turn up and say, oh, I forgot my badge, you need to help me here, help me out. Or turn up and I've got a mate who does this, and one of his classic things, he turns up dressed like an electrician. He's quite tattooed, and he kind of can fit the stereotype. Turns up dressed as an electrician, walks right in, puts some hardware in there, and then he's inside the network. That's obviously he does this with permission. If you don't have permission, you're just doing crimes. So try not to do that. The social engineering is kind of a big part of it, right? And of course, the bad guys use that as well because it's relatively easy to do. So the way to combat this, you talked before about you got a call from your employee for when it comes to this kind of stuff. There's no real technical. There's some technical guards around it, right? You're saying a bit that if it's coming from a dodgy email account or something like that, okay. But if it's coming from inside your company, then you really just need to have processes in place to kind of catch this stuff, and that's all it is, right? It's if people are paying invoices to somewhere new, or it's a new vendor, or there's like something that they're not doing day in day out to the same set of companies, you just need to verify on phone. That might be one way of doing it. I mean, it's going to depend on each company, but having a second source of authentic, having some vigilance can fall over, right? We suffer from fatigue with this kind of stuff, right? So if you just got the processes in place where it's like, oh, this is a new account, I need to call Bob, and you just make sure you verify that stuff first, or you're calling the person ostensibly on the other end of the email to make sure that it's they really sent this, all that kind of stuff. That can thwart most of it. Of course, there's more sophisticated scams out there, all that stuff, but for the most part, picking up the phone would probably help, or having some kind of process in place where you where they have to be verified by a second person before you can transfer the money, whatever it may be.
And odd behavior, I guess, like in the situation that I was in, my employee thought it was very strange that I would be asking them to do this because I've never asked that before. So being aware and saying, actually, this is unusual behavior, and if it looks unusual, just ask the question, because I was listening to a recent episode on the Lex Friedman podcast with Brett Johnson, who is a notorious cybercriminal. And what he was saying is that the thing that surprised him the most when he was social engineering a lot of the crime was that people were too scared to challenge when they thought that it was unusual behavior. The other thing he thought was really unusual was that when people knew that they got hacked or they got a crime committed against them, that they didn't report it because they didn't know who to report it to. And they're embarrassed.
I'm not surprised. So absolutely. So social engineering, something to consider. And then back to kind of what we had talked about before, the ransomware thing, in terms of combating that. So that may happen. And having some kind of, like, the backups are just the most important thing, right? And we talk about backups, but having something in place, like we talked about, like I just mentioned before, with fatigue, with like constant vigilance, setting it up, set and forget, right? So you use your cloud providers, or you use some other thing that automatically backs up. And if you get ransomware, you don't keep all the most important secret source on some server in your company, where if it gets hacked, you've got no backups, you're screwed, right? Having it, making sure that stuff is always either syncing to kind of, some kind of a cloud provider, or, if you really want to, if you prefer to have your own privacy, even though a lot of these cloud providers are required to be, to be very privacy centric. There's a thing called Own Cloud, which you can look into, and you can set up, basically, you set up your own kind of servers, and it does the same kind of thing. It syncs everything to the cloud, but you own, where that data is, right? If you want to make sure that no third parties getting it. So backups are essential, and really, if you've got good backups, not only are you kind of combating ransomware, they ransomware a few of your machines, and you can just say, piss off, and just wipe the machines, start again, pull your files back, you're good to go. But you've also got like a disaster recovery ready to go then, right? Something really bad happens, and bunch of machines get lost or there's a fire or something like that, it kind of like doesn't matter, right? Your business continuity isn't affected.
Which is the real really threat here, right?
Yeah, that is the real threat. It's business continuity is really what we're worried about here. It's you having to just stop. You're in a busy period with all this stuff going on. You can't access your email to find out where your shipments and coffee is. You can't access your email to find out like what orders you've got pending, what invoices you've got to pay, all this stuff because someone's blocked your access to it because they've encrypted the stuff.
As well as historic data, if you've got to get your taxes done, if you've got to get your bookkeeping done, like it would be a nightmare if you don't have a place where that's all backed up.
Absolutely. And like taxes, right? That's another classic scam, right? We see a lot of the ATO in Australia. We see a lot of the tax office scams, like or the call, IRS is obviously the big ones in the US.
I had one of those.
They just they're everywhere, right? So most companies nowadays will be sure to tell you that we will never contact you asking for super duper secure stuff. But it is important to at least be aware that this stuff happens, I think. The other thing that I haven't mentioned, but I hope everyone's kind of got, is an antivirus. Antivirus is quite effective and cheap or free.
Do I need one of those on my Mac?
Mac system. So it's ultimately about opportunity, right? So if I'm a bad guy and now let's say 30% of computer users are now on a Mac. Yeah. Well, I'm just not going to like leave that 30% like that's potential money, right? So it's like the malware is different, slightly and all that kind of stuff, but you still need it. I think it's still a good idea to have. I think it is still a good investment. There was a time when I was working in the antivirus industry where there was this trope that I bet you the antivirus companies are making the viruses. And honestly, if we had the time to do that instead of just kind of like trying to dig out of the piles of malware that were being like hundreds of thousands of new malicious files a week, then that would have been nice to have that time to go doing all that stuff. But it is the volume. There's so much money in infecting people's machines for one reason or another, banking or ransom or something, it's worth having. Antivirus is a really cheap kind of herd immunity as well, if you think about it, because if as an antivirus company, they have thousands, millions of customers, they can, one of those gets done with like pinged with a piece of malware, and then, the antivirus smarts get updated, then everyone's protected against that thing now, right? It's now rendered useless. So I think it's an important thing to consider. And if you do get your antivirus popping up and complaining at you, like pay attention, like maybe just have a look at what it is, right? This is quite important as well. If you're a company, small, medium business, if one of your employees is having their antivirus pinging and saying, oh, something's going on, that might be someone attempting to get in that the antivirus is stopping, but they might be stopping it forever, right? And we see this often. We have clients where they might get ransomed, for example, but you look historically, there was dozens of alerts, right? There was dozens of alerts about these people trying to get in through a web server or trying to get in through, maybe someone in HR or someone over on customer support were just being hammered, and the antivirus was stopping them, but they can only do it so much, right? Because then they change it, tweak it, not detect it anymore, or try again, or try a different way. So they had all these alerts and they didn't even look at them. And then ultimately they finally get in because they only have to get in once. And then, they ransom, right? And so, it's important to at least pay attention to what the antivirus is saying and have it in the first place.
So we're going to do 2 more very quick episodes. The next one, I want to kind of talk about, I guess we've already started covering it, but the ways that a business, if today it's going to look at how it defends itself against this kind of stuff. Let's do that. And then let's talk about what happens if you do get infiltrated. Is that the right word, infiltrated?
If you do get compromised, thank you, sir. Or if your business gets breached, or if you get, yeah.
They're all very military terms, aren't they?
Oh, they are, and it's because the kind of military and the cyber kind of security industry are very overlapped. There's a lot of people that go from one way to the other and all that sort of stuff, and yeah, it is.
Which is why coffee people are saying, nobody gives a fuck about us. Why do you want us to give a shit?
Yeah, well, so the same. I'm sure the people who are running real estate agencies,
right, or hospitals,
right? Yeah, hospitals. Like, why would they do that? That'd be horrible. Who would?
Yeah. So we'll be back in the next episode to talk about. We're going to talk about how to start getting your business ready to make sure that you don't get hacked. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.